So if you're reading a law and it kind of triggers this, I can't do that, then it's not something you should do anyway. It's not gonna fit your way of doing it. You have a certain style, a certain belief system, certain values. I'm not telling you to go outside your values, but look at that law, which is probably the ugliest in the whole book, Crush Your Enemy Totally, and understand that in the business world, that law prevails 95% of the time. You'd have to go back to my early childhood. Maybe, I felt as a child a little bit helpless around my parents in some ways. I was a very sensitive boy. I still have that issue. They were great parents, but they weren't the most overtly affectionate. And so I was always kind of wondering and observing them and trying to be careful around them. I didn't do anything to upset them. So I became kind of an observer of people. And my main thing was, as sort of a protective device, to not be hurt and to be able to have a degree of control over the people around me. So I didn't feel like I was, going to get yelled at or something like that. And then as I entered the work world, it was sort of a rude awakening for me because I had studied literature and languages. My major was ancient Greek and, things that are completely impractical in this world. And then I enter the work world with all of my dreams, my illusions, my fancies. And it's like slapped in the face. This is not what I expected. I had many different jobs. I lived in New York. I did journalism. Then I lived in Europe. I traveled around because I couldn't really find out what I wanted to do. I worked in a hotel in Paris. I taught English in Barcelona. I did construction work in Greece on an island in Greece. I worked in a television company in London. You name it, I did it. And I had all kinds of bosses. I saw all kinds of power games and manipulations going on. And so taking that knowledge from my childhood of observing people, seeing how they operate, seeing what's really going on behind their minds, because people wear masks. They don't tell you what they're thinking. They don't want to admit that they want power, that they want to control you or manipulate in some way. And so I was always kind of a decipherer of people and what their real thoughts were. And to me, figuring people out is a form of power. And then I worked in Hollywood, which is kind of the ultimate power environment. Because nobody in Hollywood wants to admit that their goal is power. They want to make it, oh, we're about art, we're about creativity, liberal causes, blah, blah, blah. But really, they wanted power. It's the most power-hungry environment I had ever witnessed. I observed a kind of a double-faced think quality going on. On the one hand, they would present this front to their employees, to everyone else, but really they were practicing all of these games, these kind of power games going on. And so that's what sort of inspired my first book, The 48 Laws of Power, because my sympathies are more on the side of the underdog. I don't have a sympathy for a Hollywood executive, for a Michael Ovitz, for a CEO of a company. I have sympathy for the poor guy like myself who is thrown into these environments, doesn't understand them, is a bit naive, doesn't know the rules of power that these generally white men, at least back in that era, seem to know instinctively. And so I wanted to reveal to everyone what goes on behind closed doors, the real games of power that people play. So it's not that I'm obsessed with it, but I feel like people like myself are often too naive. They don't understand what they're about to get into. They don't understand how rough and brutal the world can be. And I actually wanted to kind of help them and reveal the kinds of things that I learned the hard way. Well, people have this misconception of power. They think it has to do with, CEOs and presidents, and it's kind of ugly and dirty. I have a much different conception of it. It's something that has to do with your daily life. Now, I have the idea that much in our lives we cannot control. You can throw a number out, 95%. You can't control disease. You can't control the people that you meet. It's by chance that you met your wife and you fell in love and you ended up marrying her. You kind of fall into jobs. There's much in life that is way beyond your control, but there's a margin that you can control, right? And it's mostly about your relationships. It has to do with your children, your spouse, your partners, your colleagues at work, your bosses. And the feeling that you have no control over them, that they can do whatever they want, that you have an idea and you want to sell it to them, or you want somebody to stop their annoying behavior and you can't control them, they're completely oblivious, they won't listen to anything you say, is to me the worst feeling for a human being to have. We're animals that need that sense of I can influence my environment. I can influence the people around me. And the sense of helplessness is a very, very primal feeling. It's like when you take an animal, I don't know if you have dogs or cats, and you put them on their belly, they feel exposed, they feel terrified, and that's when they attack you. Well, that position is like being on our belly. I can't control my teenage son. He's into drugs. My husband or my wife isn't listening to me. Ugh. My boss is doing, you want the ability to be able to at least defend yourself or to have some influence or power over them. It's a small margin because there's much you can't control, but to the degree that you can have some of that power and then there's one other aspect, probably the most important aspect that I'm forgetting here, is power over yourself, self-mastery. Because a lot of the problems that you have in life, you can't really control yourself. You're subject to all these emotions, these moods, these things that grab you, that obsess you, that possess you. Your mind has these recurrent thoughts. You have no self-control, and it drives you crazy. You have a habit you want to get rid of. You take some program, some class, and 3 months later, you're back at it. What is it? So the sense that you can control yourself to a degree, and the sense that you can have some influence over people is power. And the more you have it, the greater the feeling you have, because you can avoid that helplessness that makes all of us kind of crazy. Well, that was sort of what I wrote the book about, but a lot of it comes from our culture, which I think plays often a very negative role in our lives. It teaches us the wrong kinds of lessons. And so back in the days when it was television, now it's whatever you watch, whatever medium. All of the villains in the world were these power-hungry people in black coats with cars with the windows kind of blacked out, and doing all sorts of evil, ugly things. That's what we think of as power. It's like a cultural trope that we've all digested. This kind of Machiavellian character who's out to kind of destroy people. Nobody thinks of power in a positive sense. And it's maddening. It drives me crazy. It's incredibly hypocritical when self-help books are written and they're trying to say that power or ambition or influence are ugly things. When the writer himself or herself is actually a very powerful person who has influence, who has control, it's awful. It drove me crazy. It's why I wrote. So I try and tell people, look, who's one of the great saints that we hold up in our culture? Mahatma Gandhi, right? I certainly venerate him. He's an amazing person. And I read very deeply about Gandhi, and I wrote about him in my third book, The Strategies of War. And his goal was to throw the English out of India so they could finally experience independence, because the people had been subjugated for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be human in a way, right? A very noble goal. But he realized quickly on how difficult it would be. So he had to be strategic. And so he had things like the Salt March, where he very much plotted in advance that he knew, using his method of civil disobedience, where once the police came out, you were not to fight, you were to accept them. If they beat you, you accepted it. You never fought. No violence. But he knew that back in the day before television, that the media, the newspapers, would cover their English bobbies or whomever they were, beating these people up. And it would play horribly in England, because people in England thought that they were very liberal and open-minded, that they weren't these horrifying imperialists. He was strategic. He knew that he had to get maximum publicity for very ugly confrontations. Years later, Martin Luther King, another icon, who also practiced civil disobedience, utilized the same tactics in his campaigns in Selma and Montgomery. At one point, it was very controversial. He had children of the ages 13, 14 involved in this march, that they would get beaten up. People were in his group castigated for this. How could you be like that? He knew that that would play on television now to the white audiences around America. They'd be horrified. If you want power in this world, if you are fighting for a cause, if you want some kind of justice, you have to be strategic. You have to think like that. You have to think in terms of power. People just don't give themselves up. If we have the Me Too movement now, men are not just going to give up all their control in a place like Hollywood. You have to hit them. You have to be strong. You have to be forceful. It's a power game. And I can't stand people who are naive, who think that just being themselves, just being virtuous is going to get what they want in life. If you're going to fight for something, you have to be able to meet the enemy on their terms of power. So that's sort of how I like to explain to them. There's nothing unhealthy about Gandhi or MLK as far as I know. But you have to understand there's an offensive and a defensive side to the laws. Okay. And I always tell people who have these kind of compunctions about crush your enemy. Totally. I don't want to do that. Well, neither do I. Okay. So if you're reading a law and it kind of triggers this, I can't do that, then it's not something you should do anyway. It's not gonna fit your way of doing it. You have a certain style, a certain belief system, certain values. I'm not telling you to go outside your values, but look at that law, which is probably the ugliest in the whole book, crush your enemy totally, and understand that in the business world, that law prevails 95% of the time. When a company like Google or any tech company has an enemy, their goal is to get rid of them completely, to buy them out so they have no competitors, right? Look at Amazon, but even smaller businesses dealing with rivals. It's a dynamic in the business world. So you need to be aware of it and not be naive. You don't have to practice it, but you need to be aware of it. Other laws are just simply trying to show you how, we're animals that kind of base our opinions a lot on what we see and perceive. We don't often think too deeply. We kind of take people based on their appearances. So there's a law of power, and they're called always say less than necessary. Very kind of common sense law. And the idea is that if you're in a meeting with people, that man or woman who talks less generally has an aura of power, particularly a boss. They seem enigmatic, mysterious. And when they do something, say something, everybody's hanging on their words. What did that mean? What does it? Whereas people who talk a lot give the impression that they're weak. They signal weakness. They can't control themselves. So they can't control themselves. How can they control anything in the business world, right? So we sense that in people. So be aware of that. You're probably talking too much in a lot of circumstances, and maybe you can control that. And so this is kind of a way of defending yourself in an environment where people will tend to see you as weak if you can't have any self-control. If you see that a law that's ugly, that makes you skin crawl, you don't want to do it, I have no problem with that. There are a lot of laws I don't practice in there, but you need to be aware of them. You need to be aware that other people are practicing them so that you don't become their victim. Then there are other laws that, yes, you should practice, right? Like appealing to people's self-interest when you're trying to influence them, or despise the free lunch where you learn to pay for things and be generous with your time and your money for people. So it depends on the law. But I hate it when people say, oh, what an evil book. Those are people who haven't read it, because half the laws, or more than half, have nothing evil about them. And the other half are about opening your eyes. I never say you have to practice this. I'm just making you aware of reality of what goes on in the world. Unfortunately, in the world today, and I've had this experience and we read about it in the news, a lot of people who have a dark side, whom we might consider rather immoral in their behavior, get pretty damn far, right?
Yeah.
And they use these laws and they don't pay any consequences. So there's no kind of ultimate justice in this world, although there might be in a religious sense. I don't deny that at all. But in a secular world, there's no consequences to pay for it. So people, if they have a law, if they do crush your enemy totally, and that's their goal, they might end up being even better at it than somebody who doesn't really want to go there, but then kind of tries it half-heartedly. I'm not here to say that justice and goodness always prevails, but the people who have those kind of intentions, the true sharks in the world, they don't need my book. They know it. It's in their DNA. They grew up at the age of 5 or 6, 7. It's already been implanted in them. And I write about that in my last book, The Loss of Human Nature. You can see that in certain people at a very early age. The great therapist, psychoanalyst Melanie Klein identified the greedy baby at the age of 6 months that was already sucking so hard on the mother's breast. And she saw that this type of baby turned into the type that was actually very aggressive in life. So it's inbred very early on. People like that have patterns of behavior they cannot control. But those people with those kind of intentions who are very manipulative, I believe very firmly ultimately they hit a wall. They piss so many people off. They don't know the soft side of power. They have no self-control because all they know is grab, 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 push, push, push. They don't know when to yield. They don't know when to step back, right? They've only learned one way. And so that becomes their downfall. Well, I'm not sure I completely agree with that because under the way I've defined power, where you feel like, okay, so let's say you have a spouse who has a very annoying pattern of behavior. And in my books, I train you being direct and yelling at them never work. You have to learn the art of insinuation, of persuasion, which often is stepping back, which often involves teaching them a lesson, mirroring their behavior. Right? And so your intention is not ugly or bad. It's that you can't live with this person unless they alter their behavior. And so you think about it, you strategize a little bit, you take some steps, and it works. So everybody is born with a DNA that will never be replicated in the past or in the future, right? There is a uniqueness about every person, and there's a uniqueness about your parents, about your background, about your early years, right? And that uniqueness is a seed that if you cultivate it and you use it and you know your purpose and you mine it for power. In mastery, one of the master I interviewed was a woman named Temple Grandin, who was born with severe autism. At the age of 2, she was about to be committed to a hospital for the rest of her life. She was like almost like in a walking coma. So for some reason, they got her a teacher to teach her language, and she started emerging a little bit. And then slowly she blossomed, and she realized, because it was something common to a lot of autistic people, that she had an incredible connection to animals. And a lot of autistic people have that. She couldn't connect to people. They were so tricky and deceptive. She didn't know how to deal with them. But animals, give her a horse, a dog, a cow, she felt like she was one of them. She ended up following that path and becoming a high-level animal behavioral scientist who, she was born with autism, about to be committed to a hospital, and yet she achieved incredible success in life as a scientist. I do honestly, and I'm not faking, I do honestly believe that everyone has that potential. But it's not equal in the outcomes of that. There are a lot of people, the majority of people don't follow that path. But I do believe everybody has that potential.
Is that potential like objective greatness, or is it our own subjective greatness? I.e., I can become the greatest version of Stephen, or do you believe that everyone could become great in the context of, the very best in the world, like, Steve Jobs? Or
No, they're not going to, you don't have to be the very best in the world. I mean, when Mastery came out, the New York Times wanted to do a story about my house in the home section. Okay, well, why? But all right. I never get any publicity from mainstream media, so okay, fine. So I had to quickly upgrade my house because they were going to come over with photographers. And we got a man over to do the tile work on my patio, which looked like hell. And I told people, this guy was a true master. He wasn't like making 6 figures. Nobody would ever write an article about him. He will die and no one will ever know that. But I could see in the quiet quality and how well he understood it, and the care that he took in it, and how much he enjoyed, creating a beautiful effect with tile work, that he was a master. It doesn't have to be the best ever. You don't have to be famous and successful. There are grades of this. There are degrees of it. Some people, it's just being a great parent. They're very social. They're very empathetic. And they're not maybe going to become an extremely successful finance person, but they're really good at raising their children, and they put a lot of effort and care into it. That's fantastic. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be Steve Jobs. There are levels of it, right? But the sense of this was what I was meant to accomplish, and I'm following it, and I'm happy what I do. I feel fulfilled by my work, and I can go on doing it. I take it seriously. I care about it. I do believe that anybody can have that level of power in their life.
I think I struggle with that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, please.
On a personal level. I struggle with enough being enough. And also, I think I've grown up in the generation where there's so much comparison everywhere we look, when we open up our phones and Instagram, that you kind of always are led to believe that you're not quite there yet. Now, I've contended with the idea that maybe that's a good thing, because it drives you forward. It's that pressure you described. It's that creates that urgency, that desperation. So maybe I should never believe I'm there yet. But then also I wonder, am I going to defer happiness off into the future because I think it's behind some kind of accomplishment or job title or, you know, success in my life? And, when I hear about that tiler, I go, that person that was tiling your patio, I'm really jealous because they sound content with much less than would make me content. What is the correct answer? Is it to be the happy tiler who's tiling the patio, or is it to be the impatient Steve Jobs that's striving for the personal computer?
Well, it depends on who you are. We're all individuals. We all have our unique energies. It's the fact that you engage, you love that you're emotionally connected to it, that it gives you a sense of fulfillment, that you're not looking over your shoulder, oh, I could be doing this instead. I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to be the Steve Jobs who's continually dissatisfied, who's Faustian, who always has to have more. I'm not against that either. I don't know why we have to be so judgmental. If people are following the path and they are in love with what they do and they have a genuine connection to it, I'm not going to judge it because they're not famous or because they're not trying to be the greatest, the Michael Jordan of tiling or whatever, etc. I think it's fine. And you're not happy. You want to crush it. You want to have the number one podcast. That's fine as well. Why can't we have, that kind of diversity in our world?
The most important thing for both those types of people, the people that have that sort of insatiable sense of ambition, but also the people that are content with whatever they're doing in their lives, from what I heard there, is they both love what they're doing. And they both have those core components that you described earlier, like they both feel the challenge in their work still. And that challenge might be, okay, I'm going to do a bigger patio today, or it might be, I'm going to launch $1 billion business tomorrow for someone else. And it's really about those core components of like challenge, meaning, purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, because what you don't want is you don't want to be in your 50s, in your 60s facing death, because your days are numbered. Who knows how long you're going to live? And you're going to go, damn it, I could have done something with my life. When I was a child, I had these dreams. I thought I was going to be really great at it. And I never realized it. I went off on these other paths. I was lost. I thought I was happy, but I never really fulfilled any of those childhood dreams or those fantasies. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. And I want people to avoid that. As long as it's something that engages you, that's connected to that child that you were, it's something that you love, and that you can create these challenges for you.
Is death a motivator for you?
Well, it certainly is now, because my days are literally numbered. You reach a certain age and you can literally count the numbers of the days that might be left to you. And I nearly died several years ago with my stroke. Came this close to dying. I was driving my car, and if my wife hadn't suddenly seen something, I wouldn't be talking to you here right now. Either I would have crashed and died, or I would have had such bad brain damage that I'd be a vegetable. So I know about death. I feel it in my body. Every day I wake up, I do my morning meditation. I'm aware. There's a practice that I have in my meditation where this could be my last thought. I could die 10 seconds from now. What do I want in my head in those last seconds? Do I want to have some petty little thought about somebody who did this or said that? Or do I want to have something else greater in my head? I'm constantly aware of my mortality. And with the book that I'm writing, it's always in my mind because, frankly, I'm aware that I might die before I finish the book. So now I've written 2/3 of it. If I die tomorrow, the book can be published. And it's okay. I can live with that. But, I'm in a hurry to get it done because I know it could happen at any moment, and it almost happened to me. So I'm continually aware of it, but not in a bad sense, in a way of it kind of gives meaning to my life. It makes me aware of how, valuable each moment is, and how things that everybody, I look out my window, I see people doing things that I can't do anymore. And I go, they take it all for granted. They walk around unaware of their mortality, of how their body could break down at any day now. I'm aware of it. So I'm not going to feel envy because my mind is at a different level. I'm aware of the ephemeral nature of life, and it makes everything kind of beautiful to me. It makes me appreciate everything around me. I don't mean to be too saccharine about this because it could come off that way, because there is a dark side to it. And I definitely, in my dreams and in my thoughts, I have a lot of that darkness. But I believe the awareness of death is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It makes everything intense and makes everything aglow.
With that awareness, if you were my age, I've just turned 31.
Wow, you're a kid. Jesus Christ, man. I hate you. I was 31. I was the biggest loser. That's amazing.
If I could transplant that awareness from your head to my head,
it's hard,
that you've got from the life you've lived, but also from that stroke incident and the perspective of your mortality that it gave you and the ephemerality of life that it showed you, how do you think I would live my life differently? How would you have lived your life differently when you were 31?
I make a point of I never go through that exercise because I believe in something called amor fati, which means love of your fate. Everything happened for a purpose. I wouldn't have done anything differently if I had to go back because it all led to the right things. So if I had been in a hurry when I was 22 to be successful as a writer, I would have never been able to write the books that I wrote. It would have all gone askew. Who knows where I would have ended up. I'm very, very happy I don't regret anything. But if you're young, what often happens is, because your life, the pattern of your life, if you think of it as a weaving, is only like, for you, is only like a third woven, right? For me, it's like 2/3 woven. So I can see all of these patterns that you can't see in your life. But at your stage, you tend to think, I've got all of this time ahead of me. I'm so young. I can do this. I can go travel here. I can do this business and that business, et cetera, et cetera. You don't feel that sense of urgency. You don't realize that tomorrow you could be hit by a car. Tomorrow you could suddenly be diagnosed with cancer. People are dying now in their 30s and 40s. Unfortunately, when you get older, a bad habit is you start reading the obituary pages. I don't know why. And you start reading about a lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s are dying left, right, and center today for various reasons. It can happen. And what it does to you is it says, I only have so much time. I wanted to accomplish this one thing that I've been putting off. Okay, you wrote your book. Maybe there's something else that you've always wanted to do, but you have never done, and you're kind of putting it off. A sense of urgency, a sense that your time is relatively short, is a good thing. The other thing is, it makes, as I said, it makes everything a little more intense, a little more aglow is the word I like to use. So I used to swim like 3 days a week, and I would swim long distances, and I loved it. It was my greatest therapy. I just loved getting out of my head and just being in the water, okay? But I never appreciated it until now when I can't do it. So I want you to appreciate you going to the gym, to having your health, to being able to do these things. Don't look at it like take it for granted. And it pisses me off that young people take all this stuff for granted. They think that I'm privileged because I have this success center. No, when you're young, you have all these privileges. You have your health. You have other things that could be taken away from you. Don't take for granted these things in your life that you have that are not going to last forever. Think in those terms and think of how more intense everything around you becomes when you have that mindset.
One of the things I think I worry that I take for granted is my romantic relationship with my partner. And, hearing your story of being in that car that day, it's literally evident that your romantic partner can save your life.
She did, and yeah, we've been together for a while. I'm not going to say how many years because she doesn't like hearing that. Because, um, so we have a deep, rich past, and it's a wonderful thing. And she saved my life, and saving someone's life, man, it really is important. It really means a lot. It kind of changes things. And in my book that I'm writing now, I wrote a chapter on love, which is something I've never written about, obviously. I've written about seduction, etc., but I've never written about love. And I wrote about the incredible, the sublime quality that you can have when you allow yourself to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that falling process, where you get rid of your ego, you get rid of your defenses, you get rid of all the resistance, and you just let yourself fall, 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 and you connect to someone on that deeper, deeper level. It's, as I say, it's a chapter on the sublime because it is a very sublime experience. And the reason I wrote it is I feel like people are missing that now because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want any pain. And falling for another person and letting go of your defenses opens you up to pain, right? And we don't want to experience that. We want to be invulnerable. And it's like cutting off all the richest experiences in life. And so I wrote that chapter addressing that and say, let go of your defenses, let go of your resistance, let yourself go into that process of falling. Feel what it feels like to have your ego dissolved in the presence of another person and care more about them than you care about yourself.
You mentioned a second ago dark thoughts and dark dreams. We all have dark thoughts. Our dark thoughts are our own. How do you go about dealing with dark thoughts, and what are those dark thoughts that you're able to share?
Well, you know, um, in my dreams, I'll be doing all kinds of weird things. A lot of times there'll be guilt, like, did I actually murder that person? Are the police actually after me? Damn it, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my reputation? Then I wake up, you know? So all that kind of stuff happens. But also doubts about myself and depression and about I've dealt my whole life with feelings of like not being very worthy. Like even doubting my success, doubting that my work is any good, doubting that I deserve it. I had, a lot of periods in my life where I wasn't successful. And I kind of had it ingrained in me that I could do better, I could do better, I could do better. I wasn't a good parent to myself. I was very tough on myself. And a lot of my dark thoughts are I'm still very tough on myself. And it's like, you know, the other dark thoughts that I have is I can't do the things that I used to be able to do. Is life even worth living when you can't like hike, when you can't swim, when you can't go out on your bicycle, when you can't travel normally? Do, is it really worth it? Maybe death wouldn't be so bad compared to that. I go through that and then I go, yeah, I talk myself out of it again and again and again. But my dark thoughts are about myself and my doubts and about the state of my body as it is right now, kind of thing.
If I said to you that I had those same doubts about, if we were identical in every way, and I said, Robert, I'm having a lot of doubts about, I can't go out on my bicycle, I can't do the things I used to do, I'm wondering if life is worth living. And I asked you for advice, I said, I don't know what to do about all this self doubt I have about these books that I've written. What would you say to me?
Well, I would say there's a lot of people who talk a lot in life who bullshit their way, who say they've accomplished this, that, and the other, and they've never done anything. You have a book out there that you can be very proud of, that you can die tomorrow, and it's like a memento that will live on forever. and you've accomplished it. You've accomplished this stuff with your podcast. You've actually made things. So focus on that. Focus on the fact that so many people never get out of bed and amount to anything. So you've built things, you've accomplished things. Focus on that. And then about your body, well, you know, when you're dead, it's all gone. Who knows what there is on the other side? But just think of the insanity of what it means to be alive, and that's another chapter in my new book. The odds against you, Stephen, of ever being born are absolutely insane, and I describe those odds in the book. And I go through from the very first cells that ever, from life forming on planet Earth to the evolution leading to us sitting here, is unbelievable. So that you are alive is an incredible, astounding thing. And you have to think about that. And you have to think about just seeing the sky, just being aware is an amazing thing. So I often think about people who are suicidal. There are a lot of people like that in life, particularly nowadays. And I know because I went through that period most strongly in my early to mid 30s as I was contemplating the lack of success in my life. And what kept me going was I still believed that I could accomplish something. So even in my darkest moments, I managed to pull myself out. But then I think of people who maybe don't have that energy, who are kind of going down that hole. And I know from my own experience that hearing somebody tell them that life is incredibly amazing fact won't have any effect on them, right? Because it doesn't connect to them emotionally. And I often think, how could I connect to them emotionally? How could I make it clear to them that there's something there that's worth preserving? I don't have the answer here today, but I think about that all the time. Like, how would I deal with somebody who is suicidal? And I get people writing me like that. And I've had relatives in those situations before. So that's something I think a lot about.
It's a difficult question to answer. What you have to say to that person in that situation to get them to believe in the sublime, to get them to believe that life is worth living. I ponder whether what maybe you need to do is to get them to take the first step to create evidence for themselves somehow, whatever that small first step is.
I think that's great. I think that's spot on. That's exactly what you have to do. They have to come to the realization themselves, and through some action that you get them to do, which gives them a little bit of an ounce of belief in themselves, then the spiral can turn around. So I think you're right. It has to come from them, and it has to come through something that they actually do. All the talk in the world won't really help them. What that is something that I would like to think about, and it depends on the individual. But I think that is the way to do it.
You're writing this book at the moment called The Sublime, right? Are you writing that book because of the situation you found yourself in after having the stroke and going through that journey of saying, why is life worth living? And going in search of the sublime that we all have inherently?
Well, to be honest with you, about 20 years ago, I had the idea for the book. I read a book on the subject, and I got excited about it because they were explaining it as it's a kind of experience that's very hard to verbalize, that goes outside of what we normally experience. And I got very excited by the idea. And I planned to write that book. And then after war, that was going to be my fourth book. And my agent was getting all prepared to sell it. And then I got hooked onto 50 Cent. And I did that book instead, and I put it on the back burner. And then Mastery came up, and I got hooked onto that. And suddenly it kind of got pushed aside. And then in Human Nature, first of all, the last chapter in the 50 Cent book is on the sublime. It's about death and what 50 and facing it. Then the last chapter in Human Nature is about the sublime. It's about death and mortality. And the irony is that 2.5 months after finishing that chapter in the book, I nearly died. But what I had planned originally was I was going to go to the Gobi Desert and walk across the Gobi Desert. I was going to go swim with whales, literally whales in New Zealand. I was going to go to Tierra del Fuego. I was going to have all of these sublime experiences and write about them. And now I can't do any of that, right? All I can do is sit in my little room in my house at my desk and write the book. It's all in my head. The book is so much better because of that. So it's changed. I can't go to the Gobi Desert. I can't swim with whales or I drown. I can't go to Tierra del Fuego. I can only sit in my office, look at the birds, go through the books that I'm reading, and write the book, keeping in mind other people and what's going on in the world in their life and my limitations. So ironically, the book has become better because I had to go through this experience. But nearly dying was going, little bells were going off in my head. All right, it's time to write that book. You're not putting it off any longer.
And has it forced you to find the sublime in the everyday life?
Well, obviously, I mean, I'm writing right now a chapter on what I call the daemon, which is an ancient Greek concept that all of us are born with like a guardian spirit, right? I know it sounds very mystical, but a lot of psychologists, contemporary psychologists, have written about the daemon phenomena, the idea that you have a second self, a kind of higher self that in some way is guiding you, and it has a lot to do with some of the things we've talked about, purpose, etc. And I have to think about it. I have to think about it in terms of my own life. I have to think about, is there something else inside of me that's communicating to me? What does that mean? How does that connect with other ideas about the universe? I get to read books about it. It's a very, very exciting process. It's keeping me alive right now. And then, I write a chapter about animals and what's sublime about interspecies communication. And now I get to look at my cat. I don't look at my cat or I don't look at the birds the same way as I did before I wrote that chapter. So it's changing me and it's lifting me out of the kind of people who have strokes. We all have to go through terrible diseases, all of us, unfortunately, unless we die by an accident, cancer, etc. Strokes, the number one thing that happens is terrible depression, to suddenly lose your body and what you could do. And so this has kept me out of that depression, I have to say.
You said that all of your books have been kind of focused on different subjects, and that's very much the case. There's sometimes through lines between the different books, but they're all very much focused on a variety of different subjects. If there was a message that kind of brings all of your work together, if this was your last day on Earth, what would the message that you would want to leave the world with be?
Wow, that's a really good question. A lot of my books have to do with the reality of our life and what not what we want to believe, not our fake ideas about it, not our illusions, etc., but what life is really, really like. This is the human animal. This is how they behave. This is what will seduce them. This is what will turn them off. This is how strategies will get us what we want in life. This is how you can master your subject, not the bullshit thing that people tell you about mastery, where you can take a drug, where you can hack your way to mastery. This is the truth. This is the reality. So all of my books, the through line is, this is what the world is really like. It's not ugly. It's not beautiful. It just is. And it's great to just relate to the world as it is, to see things as they are. It kind of is liberating. And in a way, it is kind of beautiful to just connect to the reality and not being inside of your wishes about, why can't people be more like this? Why can't somebody tell me this? Why can't they give me this? Why can't I be successful? Blah, 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 blah. Getting rid of your illusions and just looking at the way life is sort of, I guess, would be the through line of all of my books.
Do you see life as a bit of a game? And is that a healthier way to view life? A game where we need to learn the rules and then play the game versus fight against the injustice of the rules of the game?
Yeah, it's all a game. Definitely. There was a great man on the left named Saul Alinsky who wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. He was a strategist for union organizing. And he would hate the world today with people with all of their virtue signaling and everything. He said, if you want to change life, if you believe that there's injustice, you have to be a strategist. It's warfare. You have to organize. You have to understand the rules that will lead to actual change in this world. And whenever you enter the realm of rules and strategy, it is like a game, you know? And so, yeah, I believe that. And I believe people with all their moralistic ideas who think just because they believe something is right, that it will get what they want, they're just living in it. They're fools. You have to strategize. If you don't, you're just bullshitting. You just pretend. You just virtue signaling. You want people to see you as a saint. If you're not willing to get your hands dirty and to organize and to say, I've got to take this A, B, C, D, I have to figure out the process of getting there, then all you're doing is just playing a game of appearances as opposed to the real game of getting things done in life.
What is the opposite of that strategy you're talking about? So I'm trying to figure out the average person that is currently not strategizing in their life. What are they doing?
Well, everybody, I guess you could say everybody has a strategy, but their strategies are extremely ineffective. Their strategies are full of illusions. So human beings have to strategize because to wake up in the morning and to go, I've got to make breakfast, you got to strategize how you're going to cook and what you're going to make and what you're going to do to the day and what you're going to wear. It's human nature. It's just people do it very, very badly. And they do it badly because they're so emotional. Now, I'm not against emotions, and emotions play a huge role, and I'm writing a lot about it in my new book. But the ability to get things done, you have to be in control of your emotions. You have to take a step back and you have to go, I'm not going to react. This person is pressuring me. They're saying these things. My natural tendency is to react, get my back up, and bite back. No, I'm going to step back. I'm going to go, what's going to make them shut the fuck up? What's going to make them get out of my life? What's going to get rid of them? What's going to defeat them if they're an adversary? All right. I made that decision not to react, to get emotional. All right. Now I have to think. If I do this, they're going to react this way. But if I surprise them with this angle, they won't know what to do, and then they'll react in a different way, and I'll be in control of the situation. I strategize. I go through a process of gaming out the possibilities here, and that's to be a strategist. The opposite is a book that I meant to write after Seduction, which is a book about human stupidity. To not be strategic is to be stupid. Stupid people create more damage in this life than anybody else with their bad strategies, their bad wars, the bad things they lead people into, their bad politics, etc. So that's the opposite of strategy is stupidity.
I also had within there that sort of emotion, being emotionally driven is very much, it doesn't allow you to have effective strategies because you'll get caught up in, you'll get
Personal things.
Personal things and things that probably don't matter. That ability to rise above, though, I think we all want to master that. I would love to master the ability to rise above in all situations at all times.
Well, you can.
How?
When you're younger, it's harder because because you've got your hormones, you've got all that energy, you've got all that adrenaline. It's harder. As you get older, it gets a little bit easier.
Do you have a system that you use just to detach yourself from the emotion sometimes?
Well, I'm not always good at it. So I've learned to not react emotionally when people say something that I think is going to be triggering. I just don't do anything. I go into my Zen mode. Oh, it's just life. It's just words. It's just verbiage. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything to me. I'm neutral. I'm unaffected. I'm in my citadel. Goodbye. Fine. It's okay. If I get angry and I write that email, which I still do, I don't send it. I put it in my draft box. I look at it a week later, what the heck was I thinking about? I'm glad you didn't send that. You delay your reactions. But mostly, I've trained myself, and I must say my meditation practices help me to not react when people say things that are so annoying that get under my skin. I just go, that's them. It's not me. They're another human being. They have a bad idea. I don't care. It's not my bad idea. It's their life.
As you know, Whoop are a sponsor of this podcast, and I'm an investor in the company. And last month, I had the chance to sit down with Kristen Holmes. She's the VP of Performance at Whoop, and I learned so much from our conversation about circadian rhythms and things like sleep. Studies show that for every 45 minutes of sleep debt that you accrue, that your decision-making ability will drop by up to 10%. And when you're chronically underslept, you'll only be a fraction of the person, the fraction of the boss, partner, friend, manager that you can be. That's why I'm obsessed with Whoop, which not just tracks but coaches you on how to get better at sleep so you can bring your best to everything that you choose to do. If you're not convinced, you can try Whoop for 30 days completely risk-free with zero commitment just by going to join.whoop.com/CEO. That's join.whoop.com/CEO, and let me know how you get on. If you don't like it, there's no commitment. Join.whoop.com/CEO. Earlier, you mentioned the opposite of strategy was stupidity. So let's talk about politics. It's a really interesting time in politics at the moment. I'm really obsessed with US politics in particular because it's more like a reality show over here than in the UK. It's quite boring.
It is very boring over there, I must admit.
This year, Trump is running for re-election against Biden. The country seems to be very divided for a number of different reasons. It feels, I don't know, I just feel like it's more divided than ever. I do feel like the left has moved further left than ever before, to the point that I struggle to resonate with that side, and I still don't resonate with the right. So I kind of feel a bit trapped. What do you think of everything that's going on, and how does your kind of work inform what's happening and everything in between?
Well, we all have biases, and I've come from more of the liberal side, the left side. I was actually rather extreme when I was younger, so I have that bias. So I'm not really going to be objective. So let's get that out of the way, right? I have my emotional reactions, my triggering by what I see. But I'm very concerned about the overall spirit, the overall zeitgeist. So I worked as, I know this will sound like I'm going in a tangent, but bear with me. I was on the board of directors of a publicly traded company, American Apparel. And I was brought on there because I was friends with the CEO, but he thought of me as a strategist because he loved the 48 Laws of Power. And I started seeing that things were kind of going downhill. And I sort of had my finger on what the problem was. The problem was our demographic was basically young women at the ages 18 to 24. And it's a very difficult demographic to deal with because their tastes change very quickly. They're very viral, et cetera, et cetera. And so what worked early on with American Apparel, it was slowly becoming a cliche, right? And it wasn't going to translate well to a new generation coming up, which ended up being Gen Z. And so I had the idea of we need to have these retreats, these yearly things where we step back from the day-to-day business and we think about the brand, where we're going, how we're going to adapt. We're not going to change it, but we're going to adapt, et cetera, et cetera. I presented it to the CEO. Well, no, we don't need any of that. Blah, blah, blah. What I came away with was that the reason businesses are so awful, large businesses, why they suck, why they're never successful, why they're so damn annoying, is because they're always dealing with the quarterly report, at least for publicly traded businesses, right? They can't have a long-term vision because they can't afford it. They have to deal with what Wall Street will say to that quarterly report, and what the investors are, how they're going to react. To sit there and step back and think about where you're going to be in a year or two, we might not even exist in a year or two, so forget it. Well, politics is the same thing. You've got to win elections. You're facing every couple of years, every 4 years. You don't have the luxury of thinking of the larger picture. And that's what we're suffering from right now. Because if you look at the political situation in America, nobody has any loyalty to anything. So in my age, when I grew up, you were a Democrat, you were a Republican, and you had kind of roots, and you believed in that because, well, the Democratic Party was for the working class. We were for the unions. We were for the common guy, the little guy, the FDR mentality, even to some extent Kennedy and Johnson. The Republicans, we were for big business, for lower taxes, blah, 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 blah. You had a sense of connection to it. Now people have no connection at all to any particular party, which is fine. I don't. But what that means is it's so volatile. So somebody will vote for Obama, then they'll vote for Trump, then they'll vote for Biden, and then they'll vote for Trump again. And there are plenty of people in that situation. They have no roots. They're not connected to anything. And it's not people's fault. It's our politics' fault. They're not creating a sense of what it means to be an American. What is it? Can you give us a story, a myth about what it means to be an American in 2024 that will connect us, that will kind of give us a sense of what is beautiful about our country? Because there are beautiful things about it. It's possible. It's very possible to create that kind of a vision if you can step back and you can think in longer term. All right, maybe it's hard to do that for America, but what is it for the goddamn Democratic Party? What does it mean to be a Democrat? What does it mean to be a Republican? It just means to be a lapdog for Donald Trump, to believe everything he does. But the Democrats have their own problems, their own issues. You can't have a party that's just against everything. What are you for? I often tell people, I'm sick of hearing what you hate. I'm sick of hearing what you're against. I'm sick of hearing what you're complaining. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you're for. Tell me your vision of what a great country would be like. But they can't do that because they're only in this bubble of what I hate, what I'm against, it's what I'm trying to protect, et cetera, et cetera. So there's got to be a politician that rises up at some point that has a vision, that's not just a demagogue, that's not just a charismatic that's looking out for themselves. They can connect the dots, they can say, this is what it means to be in this party, this is our vision, this is what connects, this is the glue. Yeah, there are going to be little separate parts of it, okay? But we're the party of the working class, right? We're the party that's going to protect people, make life easier for them. Or we're the party of business, et cetera, et cetera. I don't care what it is, but create a vision, a sense of who you are, of what it connects to. Hit people in their heart, you see, Trump succeeds because he has an emotional, visceral effect on people, and he's very good at it. The Democrats can't learn that. It's always about a laundry list of we're going to do A, B, C, D, and E. We're going to hit the numbers. We're going to reduce inflation. We're going to create this amount of jobs, et cetera. It's all in the head. It's not in here. You've got to connect to people viscerally, emotionally. You have to create a myth that will connect people even within their disparate little niches. And it's possible, because to believe it's impossible goes against the grain of history. Somebody will emerge. I might be dead when it happens, who will go through some process by that, because otherwise everything will fall apart.
Robert, we have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest.
Oh, I remember that. I didn't prepare.
It's okay. I'm sure you can come up with one about the sublime, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. The question for you is, okay, and you're not allowed to say nothing. If you could change one thing from your last 10 years, what would it be and why?
Well, I would have prevented my stroke. I would have realized that I was burning myself out, running the laws of human nature. I would have taken it slower. I would have realized that my body has limits, and I would have been easier on myself and not put myself, because that book was very stressful and very difficult. I would have taken it slower. I would have gone at a different pace, and I wouldn't have had my stroke, and I'd be so much happier.
Do you think you could have prevented your stroke?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a weird set of circumstances, but the stress of writing the human nature kind of ground me down. And then I had kind of high blood pressure already. And then I took a trip to New York where I forgot my blood pressure medication. And then I was hiking in a park and a wasp stung me here. And 5 days later, this whole area got inflamed, turned red. I was itching. I couldn't stand it. Went to the doctor. They prescribed me basically a steroid, which raised my blood pressure to the roof. And then when I had the stroke, my blood clot was exactly where that wasp sting was in my neck. So if I hadn't worn myself into the ground, if I hadn't forgotten my blood pressure medication, if that doctor hadn't prescribed to me that nasty prednisone, if I had just been more careful like that, I probably wouldn't have had the stroke.
Are you able to forgive that sequence of events and the people
Yeah.
involved?
Yeah, I have to. I've forgiven the wasp. You know, that wasp maybe died because of me, because I don't know if wasps die when they sting you, bees do, but I've forgiven the wasp. I've walked past that spot where the wasp stung me and given my little prayer to it and said, I'm sorry about your little life, etc. And yeah, I've forgiven. I've gotten over that, and I've made my peace with it. You know what? It was meant to happen. Amor fati, it was my fate. And probably it happened for a good reason. I mean, I'm right now contradicting my answer to that person's question, but so what? So's life. Because the way I think about it is I was kind of reckless with what I thought I could do. And probably if I hadn't had my stroke, I probably would have something else bad would have happened, because I didn't realize my physical limits. I probably would have. And so I'm alive. I have my brain, and I'm writing this next book. So it happened for a reason.
If that bee wasn't there that day,
Wasp.
sorry, correction. If that wasp,
No prejudice against bees,
Yeah.
please.
If that wasp wasn't there that day, and I say this because I've been reading a few books recently about how throughout human history, these tiny little events, like the Nagasaki where they dropped the bombs, and all of these tiny little events with a cloud that flew over a
The
city,
butterfly effect.
all of the little butterfly effect things. Is there anything from how these tiny, seemingly insignificant chance events can have massive
You're
consequences?
going to make me cry. Because what if there was like a little bit of wind and the wasp didn't come directly in my path? Yeah, I know. It's horrifying.
But is there anything, because that's the nature of the world we live in, where tiny little things that we cannot predict can determine our lives in huge ways, can sway our lives in huge ways. Is there anything that we can do about it?
No, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it's Ryan Holiday will talk to you about it. What you can do is the Stoic philosophy is how you react to it mentally. You can't change the physical circumstance, but you can change how you think about it and how you react.
Robert, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And I'm so very, very excited for your upcoming book, because if it's anything like your past books, it's really something worth waiting for. And
that's nice to hear. Thank you.
Before we started recording, you told me about the process you're going through. You spent 4 years writing this upcoming book, Sublime.
So far, it's been 4.5. It'll be another 1.5 years.
So that'll be 6 total years.
Yes.
It's so incredible. It's so inspiring to me.
Well, keep this in mind, Stephen. I can't type. So I used to be a fast typist, and I can't go up, take a hike to clear my head. So everything, it's not like it takes double. It takes it's like 1.5 times more. I have to write things out by hand. I have to edit by hand. I have to dictate into the computer. I have to edit with one hand. I have to clear my mind without hiking. So everything takes 1.5 times more. That's probably would have been like a 4 or 5 year book.
But as you said about your cycle, when you slow things down, sometimes you enjoy them more and you make better things.
Yes, it is. I think you're right. And probably the slower cooking will make a better book. Exactly right.
I can't wait. I hope everyone has your existing books, because they're all, as everyone's witnessed today, they're all based on challenging but important, enduring wisdom. Every single one of them. And I think we need more challenging wisdom in our society these days.
Well, thank you.
So thank you so much, Robert. You're a real
You're welcome.
hero to many. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me back.